For that. So good morning, everybody. And we are on our, I don't know how many Zoom calls and Zoom meetings that we've had, but I think we're almost experts at it. But I think there's a lot more improvements that we can make as we go along, and we'll probably learn a few more tips and tricks from Lloyd Rang's team today. So I want to welcome Lloyd and his team, Jeff, Raj, and Kapil as well. So this is going to be focusing on Zoom calls and a better way to Zoom. So optimizing your video conferencing and avoiding those potential risks. So video conferencing is such a great tool for keeping us connected and working together, but ensuring the platform is secure is really important as well. So it makes your messaging stand out using video conferencing, and the team at Lloyd Rang Communications will show us how to Zoom better in the next 30 minutes or so, and will help maximize the value of the experience for all of you in your Zoom meetings. So I just want to go through the agenda quickly, and then I'll read just short bios on each Jeff, Raj, and Kapil. So part one, they're going to be reviewing, it's going to be kind of like a panel session today. Part one, Jeff will address some issues and opportunities. He'll lead you through the risks, opportunities afforded by video conferencing. For part two, Raj will, he's a Toronto designer and photographer, and he will introduce you to shot composition, lighting, sound, and different visuals and different things that you can apply when you're doing your Zoom meetings. And the third part, Kapil will address his insights to preparing an agenda, keeping on to time, creating meaningful narrative, and following up on action items. And he is a TEDx organizer and strategist. So a lot of experience and a lot of great intel that we'll be receiving today. And I also want to thank Lloyd. He's hiding somewhere. So Lloyd Rang Communications, he's the owner of the business. So I just want to get through the bios quickly. So Jeff is a senior associate for media training for Lloyd Rang Communications. He's a veteran journalist and one of the country's leading media relations, communications, and issues management professionals. He's been a senior strategy advisor. He's a speech writer and national media spokesperson for many institutions, and as a journalist, working for CBC, Global TV, and several major newspapers. So I welcome Jeff. Next is Raj Granger. He's a graphic designer for Lloyd Rang Communications. So he's a multidisciplinary graphic designer who runs his own studio in Toronto, and he focuses primarily on print and identity-based projects in collaboration with cultural and educational institutions. And last but not least, it's Kapil, oh goodness, my apologies, Kimdas. He's Associate Communications Advisor and Writer for Lloyd Rang Communications. He is a co-lead for TEDx Toronto, and he's also one of Lloyd Rang Communications' key narrative development leads, where he advises organizations on how to use strong narratives for more purposeful leadership, culture, and strategy. So I welcome the team. Thank you very much for making the time to spend with our Clarendon Board of Trade family and teaching us all about how to Zoom effectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad that you could join us. I hope everyone is healthy and happy in this sort of strange time where we're all locked down. As Bonnie said, we're going to get through this in probably about 20-25 minutes. I'm going to take just 6 or 7 minutes and give you a bit of an overview of some of the issues and opportunities associated with Zooming and other video conference platforms. I think Zooming is already taking the colloquial term as for the range of video platforms that we have. And then Raj and Kapil are going to get into it in a little more detail. So, you know, it's a new world we're in. I think everyone's sort of experimenting, you know, some people very successfully, others less so. You know, it's one of those things, I think, where because it's new, it's attractive to everybody, and the more people see other people doing it, the more you want to do it. I mean, the metrics are pretty a pretty astonishing. Zoom saw 62 million downloads of the app just in March, I guess, when the coronavirus stuff was happening. You know, it's fast, it's easy, cheap, fun. But we would argue that those attributes are not really the reason, you know, the reason good enough to do it. And we think that it's a good opportunity or a good idea to take a look at the platform and think about whether it in fact serves your needs versus other, you know, more simple applications, you know, like the telephone. So when it's, you know, when it's good, it's really good. I mean, you get to have face-to-face conversations, although, you know, they're not real face-to-face conversations. They have their weird attributes, but, you know, especially in a period of isolation, getting people together is a challenge. So, you know, a platform like Zoom, you can do it on a small scale with, you know, a couple of family members, or you can do it on a large scale, you know, with hundreds of people. The nice thing about the video is you've got the flexibility of presentation. You can produce, you know, PowerPoint presentations. You can do video. You can share stuff easily. And once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty seamless, and people are you know, it's pretty accessible for people. Yeah, I think that it is partly becoming the new normal, just out of necessity more than anything else. And I think that people are becoming more comfortable with it in certain ways, but not always. And certainly, this may be something that's going to have a longer term effect. Is, you know, the fewer logistics associated with putting together people for actual meetings. I work for a national organization, the CBC, and, you know, moving people around from different parts of the country to do meetings is actually an expensive and logistical challenge. So, you know, this eliminates a lot of that, although not without its drawbacks. So, you know, we've all heard about when it's bad, and really, I've just got a quick example I'm going to show you here. You've probably, maybe you've even seen it. You know, take 5 minutes and just Google, you know, Zoom fails, and you'll see a whole bunch of different things. So just bear with me for a second while I switch screens here.
Profession, I was one of the only professions to say that we can never get involved with a former client ever, regardless of how long it's been, versus like some other professions say it would be years or whatever. I think it really depends on just like the ethical standards of the profession, and in reality, I've heard that sport kind of has very high standards and like good standards in terms of things, and that oftentimes people don't, like people of other professions don't have. Hold on. What happened?
All right, so that's enough of that one.
Oh my God, Jennifer. I got it.
So that one's become famous.
What happened? Nothing. Go.
There we go. So are we back to my screen now?
So I was telling everyone that I'm standing on the Empire State Building in this bed. Like this. Oh!
Jeff, oh my God, did he fall? Jeff, did you fall? Oh my God. Is that for real or is that fake?
It's just an effect.
There we go.
Effect. Candle time all the time. Because how you monitor candle. And what will it be for the wider region? I don't want to go through this difficult bit. I mean, shifting sands in the region in relation to the north makes sense. I would be surprised if they do.
She's still talking about falling in the toilet, I think.
All of that, right?
Yeah, you'll need to close that down, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think she's just closing it down, Angie.
Yeah, let me just get back to our PowerPoint here. There we go. Back to the screen. So, right, in the famous words of John Kenneth Galbraith, you know, you make a mistake, you can still become famous, but not in the way that you wanted. So, you know, the point is that your organization's brand and your reputation are always going to be at risk when the camera is on. I mean, anyone who's worked in the television business, you know, the old saying is, when the red light is on, that means the camera is on you. When the red light is off, it means the camera, or the red light is burned out and the camera is still on you. So you're always at risk when you're in front of the camera. So that's something you have to pay attention to. And there's usually not too many do-overs when you make a mistake. So you need to pay attention to what you're trying to do. And you have to pay attention to the technical limitations and the possibility for errors. You know, Zoom fatigue, it's not a real social interaction. It's an artificial social interaction. It's distorted. There's a lag time. You're not really making eye contact. There are unnatural conversational rhythms because of that lag time. Some people are really uncomfortable being in front of a camera. Some of us, you know, are kind of used to it. But you know, the element there is that you're being performative. You know, you have to behave yourself, and you're self-aware when you're in front of the camera. You know, there's all sorts of theories about self-complexity. You know, you bring your work self to work, you bring your home self at home, you know, your bowling league self to other interactions, and you know, keeping that straight in your mind, in your psychology is stressful, and I think that, you know, is something that we have to take into consideration. Also, you'll all probably recognize the blurred lines of work versus life and friends and family, especially in the world that we're in right now, where you're working remotely. The other thing too is the mandatory participation. That's a stressful thing. You know, some people, you know, have other things to do. They have other pressures in their lives, and asking them to participate in a Zoom meeting or a video conference meeting or any large, you know, sort of meeting can be an imposition and a stress. So I think you have to really think carefully about what your desired outcomes are. The other thing, of course, the bigger the group, the more that you're putting at risk for things to go wrong and miscommunications to occur. So all of this should be factored into your thinking. On the upside, as I was saying, with the social isolation, you can bring people together for real-time interactions, both personal and professional. That's a good thing. And from an organizational point of view, it's an opportunity to connect with your people, your clients, and your stakeholders. So that's good. But you know, the methodology must be something you have to take into consideration. So when you're thinking about it, you know, does it need to be a teleconference? Could it be a conference call? That's an easy thing. You know, you might be able to get to the same place with a lot less stress for people. As with any meeting, you want to know your desired outcome. You want to know your technology. You need to think about your audience, and you know, Kapil's going to talk about this in a little more detail. You want to be very comfortable with your content and very clear about your messages, and you want to rehearse it. Those are the things that you want to think about for success. So, you know, you come to your decision point. Is the video conference the appropriate choice? Is it in fact a value add, or is it a novelty experience? You know, is a telephone conference call actually insufficient for your needs? If it isn't, then maybe that's the way to go. And over the longer term, is Zoom or Meet or FaceTime or any of the other platforms, is that the best channel for your organization? You know, probably now you've got some flexibility, but over the longer term, you know, and with the development of technologies, you know, 6 months down the road, you may be looking at an application that doesn't even exist yet. So you kind of have to follow along with the evolution of the technologies. I haven't even talked about security. I mean, you saw what was happening with Zoom. They were getting intrusions from all sorts of strange places, people with evil intent. Zoom was really scrambling to catch up on the security front. Anyways, if those are all the things that you've considered, and if you've decided that in fact a teleconference is a valuable thing and is consistent with your desired outcomes of your meeting or meetings, then you can go on to the next stage. And at this point, then I think I will throw it over to Raj, and he'll have a couple of comments about how the technical side works.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I'm just share my screen here. There we go. Everyone see that okay? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about composition and creation. So I basically want to talk about, how to make your video look and sound as good as possible. Setup is the first thing. I'm going to talk about lighting, camera position, audio, some additional tips, and then, talk about testing. The first thing which I think is really important is lighting. I always suggest using natural light whenever possible. This will just make everything look nicer. Natural light is just more, makes it's just prettier, nicer than, using a lamp or sitting in a dark basement or something. And what you want to do mainly is light your face. I think that's what people are looking at when you are talking on a Zoom call. They're just seeing a little head there. If they can't see your face lit properly, they're not going to see your expressions and maybe not see your what you're trying to say. But also watch out for too much light. You don't want to wash your face out. I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. Another thing to remember is don't be backlit. So don't sit in front of a window or a bright wall. The light source should really be at a 45-degree angle on either side of you for the best sort of lighting. So here's an example of using natural light and artificial light. Artificial light casts a lot of shadows. It can look like that, telling stories by the campfire with the flashlight underneath your chin, which isn't as nice as just sort of even lighting from a window. Or again, lighting your face, but not too much light. Going back to the ghost stories thing again, you don't want to look like this guy. Too much light. You just want enough light so people can see your face and your eyes. And again, say no to backlighting. This is something I see a lot. People sitting in front of a window or a really bright wall, and you can either see right at the window or whatever, but you can't see their face. So the light should never be behind you. Again, like 45 degrees. I have a window just to the side of me in front of the computer. So it's giving me sort of a nice balanced light setup. If you're stuck in a situation where you have to sit in front of a window, just pull the shade down if you can. I find that really helps. Just let the camera balance on your face opposed to what's outside or the brightness of the window. So the next thing is camera setup. So I always talk about having the camera at the right height. It should be head on and at eye level. You don't want people looking, down or up at you. And you want to sit close to the camera so you fill as much of the frame as possible. People can still see your hand motions, but not too close. You kind of look all worked and like bobbleheady. Just want a sort of nice even center frame. And I'll show you some examples. So, this is too low. People can see up your nose. Too high, it's kind of weird. People they're looking down on you. And you just want something in the middle where it's, balanced like I am now, where your eyes sitting straight at the camera. And this is another way, it's what I'm talking about. So, for example, I have some books underneath my laptop, so to get the camera at the right level. On my laptop, I think most laptops, the camera is right at the top of the screen. So if you're not using a laptop, you have an external camera, try to get the camera on top of your screen and try to get the top of the screen, eye level, so it'll give you the best framing. Audio. So again, try to find a natural lit space, but also try to remember it's quiet. If you have to block out external sounds and there's something else you can do about it, headphones are a really good idea. I think some of you are using headphones. I know Jeff was. And sometimes the headphones will have a better mic than the microphone in your computer. So it's a good idea to test that beforehand and see what is working. Another thing too is, don't shout. If you're shouting, it either means your volume isn't loud enough on your speaker side. If you're shouting, you're doing something wrong. I think you have to sort of test that out beforehand. Usually the microphone on your computer is right there, so you shouldn't need to shout. Some additional tips, make sure you're comfortable, have a glass of water nearby. Another thing I suggest to you is avoid the virtual backgrounds that are, can hide, if you're in your kitchen or somewhere you can't hide it. The virtual backgrounds are okay for that, but they're a bit distracting. They're not, people can tell you're sort of hiding. And it's just too distracting to sort of really be professional, I think. And try to, move around, find a good spot if you can't. And then setup testing. Zoom has some really good features to test out the audio and the video. And if you can't do that, I can't figure that out, call a friend or colleague and have them say, can you hear me okay? Everything look okay? And also, check the video preview before you shut the call, so you're not, like me, just sort of fixing my hair all the time. And then another etiquette and calls, during the call. So I talk about etiquette and other tips. Don't eat while on the call. I think it's sort of common sense. Whatever you wouldn't do in a real meeting, don't do it in, a Zoom meeting, even if you're at home. Another thing too is, if you're on your phone or an iPad and you can walk around, don't walk around. It can just be really jarring to people in the meeting. I think Jeff showed that video of a lady going to the bathroom too. So that, a laptop on your lap is also not a great idea, because it just sort of tends to wobble a bit. And then again, you're having people look, up your nose. And I say stay professional. It doesn't hurt to dress up a little bit. I think, everyone here is dressed great. But, if people like, I'm at home in my pajamas all day, maybe you should put a shirt on in that case. I don't know. Some other tips. So, I think some of you are doing this, hide your preview if you don't want people to see you. But if you are presenting like I am now and you hide your preview, so you don't distract by looking at yourself, don't forget that people can still see you, even though you can't see yourself. And use the spacebar. I think everyone's doing this here. I think it's kind of caught on now. You can use the spacebar in Zoom to mute and unmute your audio, which is really helpful. And look at the camera. Don't forget that people are looking at you when you're talking. And even when you're listening, try to make contact with the camera once in a while, so people know you're actually paying attention. And that's what I have for tips and for composition. And I'll turn it over to Kapil now to talk about strategy and execution. Okay, Kapil, here you go.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hoping everyone can see my screen. Strategy and execution. So the biggest thing I'd like to leave you with in this section is that digital is a different medium from physical meetings. So if by way of analogy, you might have experienced this thing where one of your favorite books gets turned into a movie, and you go see that movie and it's not quite the same as your experience of the book. And that's because you can't translate a book word for word into a movie. Visual storytelling is very different from written storytelling. And similarly, you can't translate a physical meeting word for word into a digital meeting, because a digital meeting is a completely different medium than a physical meeting. There are some huge advantages to digital meetings, but there are also some huge drawbacks to digital meetings. And it's important to understand how the medium changes what your message needs to be. So a few tips and tricks from myself. So the first one is to really think about preparing in 3 dimensions. The first dimension is what happens at the meeting, thinking through the agenda and who will speak to various parts. It's much harder to cue that in a digital meeting the way it is in a physical meeting, when you can just point to people and move through the agenda. The second dimension is how the meeting is framed, circulating that agenda in advance and making sure folks have done the necessary prep work. Again, in a digital meeting, it can be hard to know, if you're a participant and not running the meeting, what the structure of the meeting is, what the topics are that will be covered. And so being able to know that in advance and lay out a structure is very helpful for your meeting participants. The third dimension is all the strategy that needs to go into the meeting, the conversations that you need to have prior to the meeting in order to set up your conversation points and teeing up the right stakeholders. Again, because we're not in a physical office environment, one of the big drawbacks to digital is that you can't have side conversations and quick chats with folks very easily. You've got to be very intentional about it. Just like physical meetings, it's really important that digital meetings are connected to narrative, and perhaps even more so in the digital environment. How does this meeting tie into the larger project that you're working on? And how does that project tie into the larger strategy of your organization? Remote work really increases the importance of that explicit tie-in, because what's clear to you might not be clear to everyone else. So define your agenda, articulate in a sentence, what is the purpose of this meeting? Build an agenda that reflects that purpose, time block it, circulate it in advance, and then use your digital platform to have that agenda visible during the meeting. Some of the best digital meetings I've been a part of have had that agenda visible on a screen share for the first 5 minutes as people are joining in. The meeting organizer then does a quick check, have I captured the right agenda items? Do we need to add anything? And then the meeting starts. Managing your time, it's always been critical in the world of meetings. It's even more so in the world of digital meetings. One of the key differences of digital as a medium is that everyone has a computer in front of them. So they've got a clock in the top right corner of their monitor that is ticking away the minutes for the meeting. They are incredibly aware if an agenda item is running overtime, if the meeting is dragging on, and they're incredibly aware of the next meeting that they have to go to because they're going to get a calendar invite right in the middle of their screen. So time management becomes a lot more important. It's also in a digital medium much harder to spill over or grab people in person to continue discussion. So make sure you really think about how you manage your time. One of the great advantages of digital meetings is the ability to record action items in real time. You can have a shared Google Doc that someone is populating with notes from the meeting and action items in real time, which you can then quickly screen share at the end of your meeting to get alignment on all of the actions and to-dos from the meeting, and then continue forward. And it's such an incredible strength of the medium because if you reserve those 5 minutes at the end, you can almost guarantee that you have alignment in whatever you're going to be doing next. Make sure you take advantage of the medium of digital. The goal should not be to replicate a physical meeting on a digital platform, but instead to really think about the ways in which digital can help you out. So, for example, you can multitask speech and text. What that means practically is that folks in the meeting can be texting you on their phone or via the meeting chat to give you real-time feedback on how things are going and where you could be improving. You're also able to use, great visuals that really are eye-catching. You can include video. You can include interactive elements as well. Another huge advantage of digital is the ability to do rapid breakouts. So in a physical meeting, you can't just divide the room in two and go into two separate meeting rooms. You've got to book those rooms. They might not be available. People have to move. People have to come back. But in a digital meeting, you can drop people into breakout rooms in under 10 seconds, have them time limited to a 5-minute discussion, and then pull them back into the full meeting room. And so there's this incredible flexibility to digital as a medium that can be really effective. Multitasking is this natural thing, right? Everyone's got a computer in front of them now. And while they're in a Zoom meeting, they can be doing any one of a number of different things. It's both a risk, but it's also a huge opportunity. On the risk side, participants can Google and they can search in real time and then bring that information to either help or hinder your objectives. And that's just a fact of digital meetings. And it's important to be aware that, if you're presenting something that might be controversial, that might have a competing narrative, that participants will be Googling in the background. But it's also a great opportunity, right? So as I mentioned, your team can be in touch with you during the meeting. People can have text conversations to share information. And real-time feedback can happen that allows you to adjust your approach on the fly. I'll close with a bit of a meditation on intention. In a physical office, we can often be a little bit careless in how we call and prep for meetings. It's just so easy to grab a group of people, grab a room, and have a 1-hour meeting. Digital forces us to be much more intentional. Intentional because the meeting actually has to be scheduled, but also intentional because it creates this huge opportunity to be more strategic about how we organize our meetings, to be more efficient with people's time, and to drive results, which are the ultimate point of meetings. So that is it from a strategy and execution perspective. Thank you very much for your time. And we'd love to take some time to answer any questions you have.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Jeff, Raj, and Capriel. And I guess while I'm doing the Q&A, I welcome you guys to correct anything that that you're seeing me do. So why don't we start off, maybe I'll just ask a few questions just to kind of get some things going. And if anyone does have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to them. So I'll start with Jeff, and then I'll go to Raj and then Capriel. So maybe why don't you give me maybe the best thing about Zoom and one thing that you, I don't want to say the worst, but something you'd like to see it do maybe in the future.
Well, from my point of view, I think the best thing about it, as I said, is that you have an opportunity very inexpensively and you know, quite simply from a technical point of view, to get a large number of people together, especially if they're broadly spread out across the country or across a region, or in our case now, in a context of social isolation. But on the downside, I think that it's an artificial interaction. It can be stressful for some people, and not everyone is as comfortable with in a technical environment as other people. So, you know, the risk, I think, is in an artificial gathering, you increase the risk of miscommunication, of people either not understanding where you're trying to get to, or individual interactions where people are you know, maybe, you know, missing a social cue or something that can be disorienting or in some cases alienating. But, you know, on balance, I think it's a good platform. You know, it allows you to share audio-visual material, and it allows you, you know, to a certain degree, reasonably normal social interaction. So, you know, on balance, I'd say it's a useful thing, but not always.
Okay, Raj, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Not really. I think the best thing about Zoom is that it's just really easy to use. I mean, pretty much every platform I've used has a share screen function. You know, Zoom has been great. Like, my kids use it on the iPad. You can use it on the phone if you have to. It works on every platform. So I don't really have anything to add there. I mean, I think what I would like to see change is maybe some of the security issues that they've been having. I mean, it is a free platform. You can pay for it, but you know, 40 minutes for free meetings, or if it's just 2 people, it's unlimited, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I think just ease of use is the best thing about it. I mean, you know, Skype, FaceTime, Google Meets, I was using Microsoft Teams with the client. They're all very similar. They're just not as easy to use, I find. So I think that's the best thing about it.
And Capriel, is there anything on your end?
I had one thing, which is that, you know, people are finding, and there's like, you know, research starting to come out that say 8 hours of Zoom meetings is more physically and mentally draining than 8 hours of physical meetings. And that's largely because nonverbal communication is so much harder in a Zoom environment, because we're just, you know, it's much harder to pick up on all those subtle nonverbal cues. And so we look for them a little bit more, and that is actually just tiring. And so it's, you know, I'm always reminded that, that, you know, Zoom is not a full replacement. And sometimes actually a phone call is better. And kind of one of my philosophies is, you know, if the meeting is 3 people or fewer, so 2-person or 3-person meeting, I default to phone. Unless like there's a clear need for Zoom.
Perfect. So maybe I'll ask one more question, then we'll go to the questions. Raj, you kind of made an interesting point about security, and that was kind of a big question that we've kind of had since we've started using Zoom. Do you have any tips for businesses as they start to host Zoom meetings, things that they can do to eliminate the potential for someone to come in uninvited, or to make sure that the meeting goes smoothly, or any other tips that you'd have?
I think the biggest tip for Zoom is, make sure if it's whatever you do, make sure it has a password. That's like the biggest thing, and make it a long password. I think it generates a password, or you can make it up yourself. And then when you send the link around, the password and the meeting ID are in that link. So just make sure that my preference would be like, make sure that only the people that you want to see that link get the link. I think the issues with security in terms of people Zoom bombing, I think it's called, are with conferences where they publicly posted the link to the Zoom meeting somewhere on social media, so anyone could get it. And then, other than that, like deeper security issues, the facts that the servers for Zoom are based in China. I mean, I think that comes down to, what are you talking about? Is it, state secrets or whatever? And I don't know what China's interested in, but I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory, but the fact is the servers are in China. So, they have access to that information. That's my only concern, but I think for day-to-day stuff, I think it's okay.
And Jeff and Capriel, if there's anything you guys would like to add, or?
I totally agree with that. I mean, you've seen some really horrible examples of what can happen if you don't pay attention to your security in these meetings. The bad guys are out there and they're looking for opportunities. Sometimes I think they're just trying to disrupt for the sake of disruption. But there was a case just last week in I think it was in England. It was sort of a fitness class for a large group of school-aged children, and someone hacked into it and posted, child porn. I mean, it's just, imagine. And that's the kind of thing that could have been prevented by understanding how security works and making sure that all of your security measures are in place, so that only people that are invited into the meeting have access to the meeting. I mean, you think, well, yeah, nobody's going to pay attention to my meeting, but they're out there. They're always trying to. It's like trying to hack your bank account. There's always people trying to do it.
Perfect.
Nothing to add for me.
Okay. So just going on to the questions now. So our first question was regarding Zoom and Facebook. So this is something I'm actually not aware of, but there's, I guess, Susan has heard that you can do Zoom and then you can go onto the Facebook page. So I think maybe is that sharing the video on Facebook? And I don't know if you guys have any maybe tips or ways that you can incorporate Zoom with social media.
Yeah, I don't. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook other than with my mom and my family. So it's not something that I do.
Well, I can actually speak to that. So, I mean, one of the things that it's Lloyd here, by the way. One of the things that can happen is, you can record Zoom meetings with the permission of everyone participating, which is what we're doing here, and then you can take the recorded version of the meeting and post to Facebook. So, my recommendation would be you only do that if folks who are on the meeting have an understanding that that's what's going to happen. And that would be the expectation here, for example, because CBOT does put these presentations up on their own platforms too, I understand. So, but I again, that's more of a privacy issue than it is a sort of a platform issue, I think.
I guess what I understood was that you could actually be on Zoom and connect to Facebook at the same time as you were on Zoom instead of recording on Facebook. So that's so I've misunderstood it then.
Yeah, I know there's I know about we've done Facebook Live events where there's been where we've only used Facebook Live as though it were a Zoom channel, and that's to do like more of a presentation. But I don't know about Zoom and Facebook integration. I'd have to research that a little bit more.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect, thanks. So our next question, this one's pretty interesting, but how can, with CBOT, for example, when we run events in person, we do sponsorship opportunities and advertising. So is there an opportunity for that using Zoom? You know, is there an opportunity for businesses or organizations to access sponsorship opportunities using this platform? So I'll open that up to any one of you.
I can actually jump in on this one too, because I have some experience with another client who had to move to virtual conference. And when they moved to a virtual conference, they had to revisit their sponsorship agreements with vendors. And one of the solutions that they came up with was incorporating sponsors into virtual backgrounds. So right now you're seeing my bookshelf and artwork behind me, but if you have a sufficient processing power on your laptop with a good enough camera, you can actually create a virtual background in Zoom, and you can incorporate sponsorship information into the background that way. If you don't, you can also do what some companies have done, is actually gone to a step and repeat, like an actual printed backdrop. And there are actually companies that produce these things relatively cheaply, and you could actually have participants with an actual physical backdrop, excuse me, in behind them as well for sponsorship information. And the third thing you can do is you can actually do what Jeff did. You could do a video share. So if your sponsorship has a promo video and you want to take a moment to recognize your sponsor, you can actually stop the presentation and just say, you know, we've got a short presentation from our sponsor. Here's a 30-second, you know, ad about what they do, and then go back into the presentation again. So those are three of the things that that I know that folks have done.
Okay, perfect. Our next question, so maybe I think this is a technical, so maybe I'll go to Raj on this one again. So Angie from the BOA is saying, using music with Zoom. I know personally I've had some issues with this as well. So what is a good way to get good sound quality on a Zoom meeting? Is it an external speaker? Is it a technique with the laptop? Or just wondering if you had any tips on that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get really technical, you could feed any kind of audio system into your computer if you have the right kind of sound card or audio input. I'm pretty sure that in the settings for Zoom, you can pick your audio input. So for me, it says microphone is my computer, but if I had another audio system coming in, I think I could play it that way. If you were just trying to do it on the fly, not really sure how you do that. I think you'd have to have some sort of, you know, audio device feeding into your computer, or an app on your computer to pipe the sound through your sound card into the Zoom call, which would be pretty technical. Yeah, so that's a good question. I think without having some sort of, you know, software or physical hardware, I don't think it's that simple. Yeah, I know that, you know, for virtual backgrounds and that sort of thing, it's set up in Zoom, but other than that, I don't really know, without using, like I said, some sort of hardware device or some sort of software to pipe the sound through like a virtual microphone. Basically, it would mix the microphone from your computer with the sound on your computer.
Yeah, there are companies that have actual like Zoom solutions or video conferencing solutions where they actually sell a package of like a lighting ring and a microphone and, you know, audio inputs and things like that. And you can actually get, I mentioned the physical backgrounds, some that actually bolt to the back of your office chair. So there's a variety of different packages available. And that's something that we can maybe follow up on. We can maybe send around a list of some of those resources through CBOT.
What's the, I can't see the question there, but what was the actual use for that?
I believe it was for like fitness classes.
Right. Yeah, so I think you would need some software that could channel your music in your computer through Zoom. Or like Lloyd said, like some sort of hardware device that would be a sort of a standalone mixer plugged into your computer.
Yeah, it's for the senior center. So
okay,
the expectation is that we can program all of our programs online. So it'd be fitness classes, choir, you know,
right.
everything but a card game, because you can't play cards without a partner.
Right. Yeah, I think if you were to plug an audio device into a computer, the Zoom would recognize it as an input, and you can select. So what if I have my headphones plugged in, for example, or any sort of audio device? It'll let me pick in the preferences which audio I want to send to the Zoom call.
The fitness classes that I've seen that are online as well use, like they webcast their physical space, and then they have audio set up in the physical space, and that's the way that they play it. So that's another option.
Yeah, except it's kind of illegal because you don't have rights to the music.
Right. Right. I don't know how they get around that, actually. It's a good point.
Yeah.
But, you know, in general, I would say that, I mean, you're not talking about doing this, but I would avoid any kind of music as background music. It's difficult enough to hear a conversation with the microphones and the headsets that we usually use. So every time I've heard of background noise, it's just it's intrusive.
Perfect. So we do have a lot of business leaders on the call, and people who within the organization would be running the Zoom calls. I guess kind of like what I'm doing myself right now. But do you have any tips for the host of Zoom calls? You know, ensuring that maybe you're respecting people's time, sticking to a timeline, allowing people to ask questions or speak when they have input. So maybe I'll go to Jeff and then Kapil if you guys have any tips for the host in these Zoom calls.
Yeah, you know what, absolutely. I think, and Kapil sort of referred to some of these points, but I think at the beginning of the meeting, you want to establish very clearly what the purpose of the meeting is, what the expected outcomes are, what the takeaways are going to be. If there are you know, work assignments, you want to make sure everyone understands pretty clearly how that's going to work. I think it's very important to stick to an agenda. I think you have to be respectful of people's times and their commitments to the meeting itself. And then, you know, at the end, it's probably a good idea to capture what you've, or to summarize, you know, the ground you've covered, and to reemphasize again what the expected outcomes are post-meeting. I'm just looking at the comments here, and I think that Bonnie makes an excellent suggestion. Some of the meetings that I've been in is, you know, try to build in a little bit of time to allow for, you know, kind of less formal networking. You know, you could take the presentation off the screen and put up, you know, the Brady Bunch checkerboard, and let people, you know, just have conversations. You know, that's, if you can build that into your schedule, that's not a bad thing. But, you know, that certainly includes building time in for questions and conversations and issues that may come up, you know, unexpectedly as a function of the conversations that you're having. So, you know, I think it's good to have an agenda, but it doesn't want to be so rigid that you don't have time to take into consideration, you know, the things that come up during the meeting.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's really important to think about, you know, the things that get lost as you shift from a physical format to a digital format, and to be very intentional about recreating those. And so the space for, you know, 10 minutes is a great example of that. You know, in the office environment or in the physical meeting environment, you know, folks kind of show up a little early, there's some chit chat, you get to hang out, get to catch up on everyone's lives. And that gets lost if you roll into content, you know, 1 minute into the Zoom meeting. And so it's actually quite important to create some space for that, whether that's a shorter agenda or a slightly longer meeting. Another thing that can often get lost is, you know, I think we're all kind of guilty of this as hosts sometimes in a physical meeting. You know, we don't quite do our prep work. And then as the meetings kind of, as everyone's kind of coming into the meeting, you quickly grab a couple of people, you check, you know, your agenda on the fly with them, and then you get the meeting underway. And you know, in digital, that's, you know, it's impossible to do. And so as a result, you've got to be much more intentional about the meeting. And, you know, I almost think about it like a love.
Oh, sorry. I think I was having some internet issues there. So usually, I think we have about 10 minutes left or so. So I'm just, if anyone does have any questions, just to please put them in the chat there. So I'll ask, I guess, the question. Usually I ask, you know, when things go back to normal, as we call it, what do you see changing? Do you think people will still use Zoom, or do you think people will go back to what they were using before with phone calls, emails, face-to-face meetings?
Yeah,
I think we don't know yet. I think that there's going to be a significant transition as people become more comfortable with remote working, and as the isolation starts to unwind gradually. I mean, I've already heard conversations about how downtown Toronto, for example, is going to adapt to tens of thousands of people coming into the downtown core, entering large multi-story buildings, even getting on elevators and all of that. So I think that none of us know yet the degree to which the remote working is going to be something that actually works for people and that they prefer to do. And if that's actually something that's going to continue for the next few months, and I think it is, then I think there's going to be an increasing level of comfort with the routine use of video conferencing platforms. But I also think that, the novelty of it, I think to a degree is going to wear off a little bit, except when it's, a good decision to use a video conference, and people are going to start getting back to telephone calls and, virtual workspaces. I mean, office environments are going to change significantly. Deloitte, one of their consultants, has already talked about the relative costs of real estate if you can only have half the number of people in the same physical space. Those costs, it throws that whole cost equation up in the air. So there's a whole lot of factors I think that we have to take a look at to try to make a prediction in a very uncertain time. So that's a long way of saying nobody knows yet.
I would agree. I think that people are getting used to these kind of meetings. It's not the greatest, but I mean, internal teams were in the same office, sure, but the further we are away from each other, if you have teams that are in a different city, sometimes those meetings take, so long to arrange, and then, so long to set up, whereas this is kind of quick and easy. And yeah, maybe a phone call is better sometimes. I mean, I find with Zoom, even if people have their picture turned off, I feel like I can see who's on the call. Sometimes when you're on a multi-person call, you just can't tell who's talking, or people cut each other off, or it doesn't work. Someone cuts out, you don't even know if they're gone. But here we can see, like, Lloyd's mic is muted, and someone else doesn't have their video on, but they're still there. So I think it's a little easier in that sense, and it's not like it's a huge ordeal to set this up. I think people have pretty got over that hump. So I think it'll continue.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I'd add that even before this pandemic, we had some big problems with meetings and the culture of meetings in organizations. The number of people who would say, I've been in meetings all day and it's 6 p.m. and I'm only now opening my computer to do my emails and my work. That was indicative of a bigger problem in meeting culture. And I think part of what this lockdown has revealed to us is the number of meetings that actually could have been an email, and the importance of output as opposed to conversation. And so I suspect that the big shift that will happen is actually just in the nature of meetings in general. And then in digital meetings specifically, I think we will see a number of things that go digital that never go back to physical. It won't be all meetings, but it'll definitely be some meetings, particularly meetings where we are convening people across geographies. That classic meeting where there's 6 people in an office and then 2 people dialing in might actually end up being a 8-person Zoom call, because it's such a better experience for the people who are dialing in.
Perfect. So I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. So maybe I'll give you guys each 30 seconds or so if you want to maybe have some last few remarks, just a key takeaway or just a key point you want to highlight from the questions or answers. So maybe I'll start with Jeff, I'll go to Raj, and Kapil, just based on how I'm seeing you on the video.
Well, you know what? I think that in business relationships, as in life, connections are important, and I think that when you have connections with colleagues, friends, family, it's important to maintain those things, especially in a situation now where we're all feeling kind of isolated and uncertain. You know, that translates easily into family life, but it's also in business life, because you don't know what's coming down the pipe, and you know you're going to try to bring, you know, the best minds in your organization together to try to you know, evaluate where you're at, where you think you're going to be going based on the evidence that you have. So I think, you know, whatever the vehicle, I think the fundamental thing that you want to maintain is active, you know, dynamic relationships with the people around.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I mean, I think it's all about connections, and I think that you know, as a society, we've been very sort of careful about not embracing tech too much. You know, I'm in the camp of, you know, emailing too much, where a phone call is way better. I think that Zoom has sort of bridged that gap. We can have a message chat in the corner, and we can, you know, see people face to face. We're not in the same room, but I think it's really great to see everyone at once. So I think moving forward, I hope it's going to even out where, you know, the technology isn't what we have to use, but we're using it because it's the best thing for the organization or for people.
100% agree on the importance of connection. And I just also add that, you know, this is a hard time for so many people, and no one is expecting perfectly choreographed and executed Zoom meetings. And there's also just an element of a bit of, you know, learning, experimentation, and talking about that learning. That is actually super helpful to the people that you're interacting with in the meeting as well.
Yeah, you know, I take piano lessons, and there's a group of people who, you know, we all play, and a couple of times a year we get together, and everybody has to play a piece, you know, and the range of players goes from sort of concert level quality, you know, and I'm at the far other end of that spectrum as a hacker. And the thing that is I think really lovely about when the group gets together like that is, no matter, you know, who gets up to play, no matter what their technical skill is or their performance actually is, the rest of the group is enormously generous, you know, and supportive. Partly, I think, because they know that their turn is coming and anything can happen. You know, so, you know, we all. I think, you know, generosity is really important to take into account, you know, people's foibles and the mistakes that can happen, and you know, I think, you know, be generous about it and maintain a sense of humor about it, and I think we'll all get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to wrap up, so I'd like to thank Lloyd, Jeff, Raj, Kapila, and Tracy for helping set everything up. I think it was very informative. I think I'm doing about 20 Zoom calls a week at this point. So a lot of really good takeaways, you know, whether it's about having the meeting effective, working on the lighting. I really like the spacebar tip. I think that was really, really nice and easy. So I hope everyone enjoyed the meeting. And just again, a reminder that all our CBOT events, you can find them at cbot.ca. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.